Alright, ladies and gentlemen, One Piece chapter 1041 is out. We got another full chapter of teases. Kaido versus Luffy is about to begin, so let's break it all down. As always, make sure you subscribe and join our King Pirates crew because we do this every week. And if you have a good time watching this video, please drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. Thank you. To start things off, let's talk about the cover page story. We are back again with the Vinsmoke cover page story. This time around, though, was a kind of a cute update that we get. It's nothing really impactful. We see Pudding beating up Yonji and Niji while they are still in the book, which is kind of a dirty move. But as it goes to explain, she's beating him up for bullying Sanji when he was a child. So it's honestly a really nice and cute gesture here from Pudding. She looks adorable as well while she's beating them up. So really my one takeaway here is that I hope that Pudding comes back to the story eventually at some point. And I actually feel like at the end of the story, there's a good chance she might actually end up with Sanji. But jumping into the chapter here, the first thing that we get to is an update on Momonosuke and Yamato. And specifically, we find out some pretty important information about Momonosuke and the dawn of the new world. Before that, though, we do get confirmation that Zunisha is here to fight for Momonosuke, and he's specifically saying that he's awaiting Momonosuke's orders, once again emphasizing that Momonosuke is kind of in control of Zunisha. And honestly, the more that I'm seeing this, the more I'm starting to believe that Momonosuke is actually an ancient weapon and that he's the commander of Zunisha. I talked about this in my most recent video about the ancient weapons. If you haven't seen that, check that out right here. But yeah, as far as Zunisha goes, I've always felt that its sheer size and destructive power is very comparable to an ancient weapon. So the fact that Momonosuke can command it just like Shirahoshi can with Sea Kings, to me that just further confirms that Momonosuke is probably an ancient weapon. And ironically, I think that's exactly what Momonosuke and Yamato end up talking about in this chapter. It starts off with Yamato specifically talking about how she read in Oden's journal that Momonosuke should be able to talk to the giant elephant and he's gonna be the one to lead the dawn of the new world. And this line specifically is very interesting because there's so many different ways you can interpret it. Personally, the theory I still believe in the most is Momonosuke is an ancient weapon, but obviously with the way Yamato is talking about things, it does seem like that Oden thought that Momonosuke might be Joy Boy. So I'm not gonna shut that idea down, as certainly a possibility, but personally I still think that Luffy is gonna end up as Joy Boy, and the whole Joy Boy prophecy is not as related to Destiny as we might think. I've been talking about making a Joy Boy video for like a month now, but trust me, I will do it eventually. But yeah, as far as Momonosuke goes, I still think that he's one of the people that will guide the world to its dawn as an ancient weapon. And I think even if Oden thought that Momonosuke would be Joy Boy, I don't think that's for certain, because even though the Roger Pirates found out all the information about Joy Boy and ancient history and the ancient weapons, the one thing that they seemingly don't know is who will become the future Joy Boy. And that's because Roger himself thought that Ace would end up being Joy Boy, and that's why he had a son. So I can see Oden thinking in the same capacity in that he wanted his son to be Joy Boy. So to me, this Yamato dialogue doesn't really confirm anything about Momonosuke being Joy Boy, but of course, as Momonosuke goes on to say, he's definitely a very important figure and he cannot die. Again, I think it's because he's an ancient weapon, but as of right now, we actually don't know the specifics, because as it turns out, Oden actually ended up tearing out the most important pages, because while Momonosuke does show that he knows that the Roger Pirates laughed once they found the One Piece, he still doesn't know the specifics of everything the Roger Pirates found out. And I think this is something we all saw coming, because first off, it would be incredibly irresponsible for Oden to just leave that in his journal, and second of all, there's no way Oda would have something in the story besides the One Piece that spoils what the One Piece is. And on top of that, a lot of people actually pointed out that this might have been actually foreshadowed, because all the way back in the Oden flashback, we saw Oden hand something to Toki, which she ended up tearing apart, and that did look like a few pages that he might have torn out of his journal. So yeah, as far as Oden's journal goes, it seems like everything that was in it is pretty much everything we saw during the Oden flashback. It definitely has some additional information in there, like why Momonosuke is so important, but it doesn't have anything that's gonna spoil what the One Piece is, which means that Yamato's not gonna spoil Luffy when she joins the crew. Listen, I had to add that in there to push the agenda. But yeah, to wrap things up with this Momonosuke and Yamato interaction, we actually get a really interesting scene from Momonosuke, because once again, we see him start to struggle with this imposter syndrome that he is simply not Oden, and he's actually genuinely contemplating here whether or not to open up Wano's borders, because the outside world is terrifying. And I gotta say, this is an interesting scenario here, because while I still think Wano's borders will end up opening, I can see the possibility that Momonosuke maybe just keeps it closed. Ultimately, if I had to pick, I think this leads to Momonosuke finding his bravery and leading as Shogun, but it's also very possible that maybe he ends up keeping it closed because number one, he's not ready to become Shogun, which could lead to the possibility of him joining the Straw Hats, or maybe we go a different angle where Momonosuke learns that him being scared is actually a good quality to have that Oden did not have, because instead it offers him a different perspective that maybe Oden didn't see. So it could be be possible that not opening Wano's borders is a better idea. Personally, I still don't think so, but I don't think that is impossible. So as far as Momonosuke goes, I'm really interested to see where this leads to, especially with Yamato being there as well, and she has her own issues with identity. So I think there's a lot of potential here for some serious character development for both of them. Moving on from that though, we jump to an update on Rhizo versus Fukurokuju, and this time we finally see officially Rhizo is the winner. He ended up outlasting Fukurokuju in that blazing fire, and honestly, it looks like Fukurokuju is dead. I know he's probably not actually dead, but in that picture, it looks like he's burnt to a crisp. But either way, shout out to Rhizo. After 30 chapters, he finally won the battle for Hokage. Jinbei ends up finding him, so he'll end up getting saved and recovering. And then the next scene we jump to is Orochi and Hiyori, and we see that the fire is starting to surround them as well, and Orochi is freaking out. And the first thing I actually want to talk about here is I'm kind of surprised that Orochi is fine, because when we got the update in the last chapter, it looked like he was down on the ground and paralyzed. So honestly, I was really surprised to see him just okay here in this chapter, but that actually ends really quickly because the roof caves in and he crumbles underneath it, and he actually can't transform to save himself because Hiyori hit him with a sea stone nail when he wasn't paying attention. And then she goes on to reveal her identity in the best way possible, announcing that the song that she's been playing this whole time was her father's favorite, and her father was Kozuki Oden. And this is just a great way to tie everything together from the Oden flashback. We know that she's always wearing the mask because she's probably crying, and also not only was that Oden's favorite song, but he also said to play it during his funeral. So the fact that she's playing this song in front of Orochi as he's getting defeated, I think is very symbolic. At the same time, I don't think this is the end for Orochi. I think that giant ass fire that Kanjuro had created is coming to save him. I'm still kind of surprised that we haven't seen Denjiro yet, because I thought at this point he was already with Hiyori, but the fact that he has not shown up yet, I guess means that he's not there yet. So I'm guessing what's gonna happen next is that giant ass fire arriving and then Denjiro also arriving. He'll probably end up saving Hiyori, but maybe it ends up costing his life as well, because honestly, the possibility of most of the Scabbards dying is becoming a real reality. And that's because the next thing we jump to is Izo versus CP0. And the first thing I want to do here is absolutely give Izo his props, because I did not expect him to be able to take one of the CP0s out with him. When I first saw this fight being set up, I thought it was going to lead to either a tragic end for Izo or that somebody else is going to come in and help him. And it turns out it might end up being both, because he pretty much just goes on a suicide mission and takes out a CP0 member with him. So he's absolutely down for the time being while there's one more CP0 member. But as we see later on, X Drake is getting back up, so it looks like he's going to get his revenge and take out the other one. But before we get to see that, we get some pretty critical information from the Gorosei, because they've now actually changed the mission for the CP0, and the new mission is to take out Straw Hat Luffy. And this of course is an absolutely absurd mission because Luffy is fighting Kaido. It's so crazy, even the CP0 are like, wait, are you serious? I'm literally gonna die. But yeah, this pretty much confirms what I thought was true, which is that the devil fruit the CP0 were talking about was Luffy's devil fruit, because they also mentioned that this is to prevent the worst case scenario, and it's something we heard through a rumor. So it definitely lines up with the conversation the Gorosei were having a few chapters ago. And as far as what this means for Luffy's devil fruit, I'm actually gonna make an entirely separate video on it. But I do think this means that Luffy's awakening is gonna happen soon, and it's gonna have some crazy abilities. As far as the CP0 goes though, I don't think either of them are gonna end up reaching Luffy. The main mask guy, as I mentioned, I think is gonna get taken out by X Drake. And then as far as the other CP0 member goes, I think the perfect opponent for him could be Brook. Brook so far hasn't had a battle yet within Onigashima, so it could be the perfect matchup for him. But if it wasn't Brook, the only other two people I can think about is number one, Kawamatsu, because he hasn't had a fight really either, or maybe Marco, because he really hasn't had his moment yet either. But either way, I don't think the CP0 are gonna interfere with Luffy versus Kaido. After that though, we get a few more updates. We see Kiku and Kinema are still kind of struggling. I'm still holding on to the hope that by the end of this battle, there are actually some casualties like the majority of the Scabbards, because honestly, it does feel like we are entering into the final battle of Luffy versus Kaido, and once that ends, the arc is gonna come to a close. Obviously, there's some other stuff to get sorted out. I still think Vegapunk is gonna show up in Wano. But as far as the main battle in the Onigashima portion, I think that's coming to an end soon. And honestly, if we don't have any casualties by the end of this war, it's gonna feel a little empty to me. So personally, I still think there's a good chance we might still get some casualties with the Scabbards, but for the time being, we just gotta wait and see. But with the next update, we see that Frankie has hit the buzzer beater and actually ended up saving Zoro. I don't know how he ended up getting there that fast, but shout out to Frankie for saving Zoro's life, honestly. Zoro still looks like he's in pretty bad shape, and given the fact that he probably just saw the Grim Reaper, he's probably on the verge of death. I'm still not really sure where Oda is gonna go with this whole Grim Reaper thing. I don't think Zoro's gonna end up dead, But can you imagine if that actually ends up happening? Like, we've been bagging on Oda this whole time about not killing off any characters, and he ends up killing Zoro and Wano. That would be absolutely insane. I don't think it's gonna happen, but it would be pretty wild if it does. With that said though, the next update we get is kind of just seeing everybody's reactions to what Law and Kid just did. We see the fodder pirates cheering their captains on, and this time hopefully for certain, Law says that he's absolutely gassed and he's done, which leads us to what seems to be the final battle of Luffy versus Kaido. These two are still going at it head to head with Advance Conquers Haki, and at this point Kaido also realizes that Big Mom loses, and we get a sneak peek of a Kaido flashback. He actually thinks back to the first time he met Big Mom on the Rocks Pirates, and I really love this little flashback for multiple reasons, because first off, we see Big Mom also saying that she's gonna be the king of the pirates, and you're seeing with her expression and the smile on her face, it looks exactly the same as Kaido did when he saved King. And it's also the same motivation and confidence that Luffy has always shown throughout the story. So it's just a really interesting perspective that these Yonko were once just young upstarts just like Luffy. The other thing I like about this little flashback is how Big Mom talks about the Rocks Pirates, where she specifically talks about Rocks as teaming up with him as opposed to joining his crew, which once again just gives us another glimpse of the Rocks Pirates and how it was really almost like a group of mercenaries as opposed to a pirate crew. And overall, this just makes me even more excited for the Kaido flashback when we finally get it. With that said though, this flashback actually turns Kaido into an emotional drunk. This time though, Luffy's not messing around. He goes into Gear 4th in this panel that is honestly pretty scary looking. I honestly don't remember the last time that Luffy looked this scary in a panel. But essentially, he goes into Snake Man and just lays it on Kaido. And while he's doing that, he reiterates everything that Kaido has put the country of Wano through and starving them. And to me, this moment really feels like shifting the battle to a very serious final phase. Because up until now, it's really just been a back and forth, and we've also seen Kaido being this like ridiculous drunk. But now with Luffy reiterating all the terrible things Kaido has done, it kind of changes the mood back to serious and really paints Kaido as a villain once again. On top of that, Luffy pretty much announces that this is his last bit of gas in his last Gear 4th, but I don't think Gear 4th here is gonna end up being enough, and Kaido's probably gonna end up winning. So I think what this probably leads to is Luffy losing once again before awakening, and then we'll finally see the terrifying awakening that the Gorosei have been talking about and get more information about Luffy's devil fruits. Before that happens though, I do think we're gonna sort out all the other little stuff like Denjiro versus the Fire and Orochi and also the CP0. But besides that, there's really not much left, and I think this battle is gonna come to a conclusion very soon. Overall though, this was a damn good chapter to me. We got a lot of really important information. I know a lot of people are frustrated that Oda has just been teasing and teasing with no confirmations at all, but I do think the info in this chapter gives us some solid stuff to theorize off of. So be on the lookout for my next Luffy video, probably dropping on Tuesday. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Get yourself some One Piece manga with a link in the description. If you guess it wrong, you have to like, subscribe, and watch the next video. And the answer is the dead man.